smoke south, heavy black smoke south of the field. To me, initiate a medical post. I've got casualties being brought to me.
Hello everyone, Stan here. Today we're looking at 3 accidents that raise some serious safety questions. The first one you already know about, the UPS MD-11 crash in Louisville. What you may not know is that the crash released energy equivalent to dozens of aerial bombs. Body camera footage from first responders gives you an up-close look at the devastation. A Cessna Citation returning from Acapulco suddenly lost control during a go-around near Toluca, captured on video as the bank angle steepened to nearly 60 degrees before impact. And finally, a Beech 1900 charter flight in Medellín that flew directly into mountainous terrain, even though the aircraft was equipped with modern GPS navigation and terrain warning systems. When things go wrong in aviation, people die. 3 in the air and 15 on the ground in the UPS crash, 15 in Colombia, and 10 in Toluca. Let's start in Louisville, where the body camera footage cleanly captures the aftermath of the UPS MD-11 crash. There are some pretty tragic moments here, so if you're a sensitive viewer, you may want to skip ahead. The wide-body jet was carrying 38,000 gallons of Jet A fuel, close to the maximum capacity for an MD-11. The total energy contained in that fuel is enormous, roughly equivalent to about 2,400 pounds of dynamite or around 80 Mark 82 500-pound bombs. Obviously, energy equivalents and destructive power are a little bit different. High-velocity explosives expend their energy suddenly, while jet fuel burns over a longer period of time. For a comparison, the deceleration of a fully loaded MD-11 from 140 knots to a stop equals approximately 390 pounds of TNT. Obviously, when this happens on a runway, nothing particularly bad happens. But make it a sudden stop into buildings and pavement, and you end up in a war zone. And that wasn't all in this case. Within the impact area was a fuel and propane storage depot, which dramatically intensified the explosions and fires that followed.
He was taken off, so he's fully loaded with fuel.
Yeah, and all these are already been blowing up too.
I think it's all this propane thing.
Or the plane hit off the truck. Watch debris.
Watch out, bomb! Charge it!
Where's your car at?
Over there, right here.
1731.
I'm back in that wreck.
Where the tanks are over there.
A lot.
I know. I don't like being this close. They're blowing up. I was watching. Flames are unreal.
It's still here now. And we're what? 100 yards back? Yards away?
Shelter in place, a 5-mile radius. Are we 5 miles away from it? Nope.
The petroleum recycling place.
Oh, is that what
They've been blown. Yeah. We need to back up. They're backing up.
When this accident first happened, much of the focus was understandably on the 3 pilots who lost their lives. But they were not the only ones affected. When that amount of explosive energy is released in the middle of an urban area, the collateral damage can be severe, and the footage makes that painfully clear.
She's hurt.
We want to get out of here.
I understand. I can't see you that way right now. Who's hurt?
God.
You guys have burns?
He's I threw myself over top of him and got busted in the back of the head with the...
I mean, that thing pretty much landed right on top of this car, man.
I seen it coming towards us, and I heard a boom, and then I seen fire shoot out, so I went over top of
I thought they were his clothes were burnt off.
The guy in this truck right here saying his son works on the other side of the fire. There are a bunch of guys off and stuff down there and they can't get out.
Grade A Recycling said the plane pretty much almost landed on top of the building.
There's just stuff going up in the air, and I just don't want...
They're big.
You got any... Man, I'm too fat for this shit, man. I need some water. I appreciate it so much, man.
Buddy, I was going to say I don't have time to talk, but I understand it's one of your aircraft. You said casualties.
I had one burnt pretty well. All his clothes were burnt off.
And he's gone?
Yes, he's been transported.
You had 2 total?
Well, a family with kids in the back seat of a van. I don't know how many kids were back there, but they took off.
Radio 10 unit on scene. Looks like they're saying that there's a burn victim at 4612 Mount Avenue. Burn over his body.
Amid the recovery effort, first responders were also conducting frantic searches for survivors, while desperate family members gathered nearby, hoping their loved ones had escaped the destruction.
There's only 3 people that we're missing is Trina, Megan, and John Locke.
2 civilians trapped and did not get out. They are still alive. There is a 3rd casualty there, severely burned.
His mom works here, and he came here looking for her. He's been staying up there for a while.
Oh, shoot. Are you hurt? No. Did you see it?
Okay. I have a gentleman that just came out of waste management, severely burned. He gets in this a wagon. It'd be great.
Will this aluminum blanket help at all? What's that? Aluminum blanket? He's gonna stick to his skin.
Not as bad as that soft.
People were coming out of the trees like being with burns, so I don't know. We might have more.
Also, possibly someone trapped at 4511 Mount Avenue, a disabled gentleman.
What's your brother's name?
Carlos.
Okay, Carlos was just here earlier, and he's on his way to the hospital. Yes.
623 on the radio. I've made contact with the two missing at the sign.
At the same time, crews had to protect themselves from the toxic mix of burning metals, jet fuel, and propane still filling the air around the crash site.
And the jet fuel burns hot, bro. And the water does not put that out.
We're in the fallout.
Any officers near the crash in a smoke area, please put on your respirators with the C-burn filter.
If you have a C-burn filter, put it on.
It's heavy in jet fuel, and it's not good to breathe in. So what I need you to do is, can you hold your breath while we get through there, and we'll kind of hightail? This is the debris, actually. Hey, so listen, try not to breathe in as much as you can right here, okay?
It's a tragic reminder of just how much responsibility rests on the aviation industry. More than 80,000 transport aircraft cross the skies every day, taking off and landing in the middle of major cities. Every one of them potentially a weapon of extraordinary destruction, whether by intent or by accident.
I guess it's a good thing it wasn't a passenger plane. And again, it doesn't make it any better. One there. Yep.
You want to see if anybody wants us to like put his body over here? Should we like check his pulse or something?
Nah, he's done. Nah, he's dead, bro.
Body down on fire. I don't know if you can see that.
Where?
Right there.
That one right there?
There's about 40 people in that direction.
HSO 22 radio. We got multiple obvious 1080s are burning, or the auto lot.
Ain't nobody in there survived.
No, we need to get in that building.
The unit who's in multiple casualties, can you advise a number?
Dude, we counted 2 to 3 so far.
Are you a PO?
Yeah.
You ever seen a dead body?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, you guys know like, are they collecting dead people?
Saw the guy that drove by us on that flatbed.
Oh, dude. He was toasted, man.
They can't tell you if one of the 4 identified as a child.
We've been told they've all been adults at this point. What's your name, man? Shirley what?
Yeah,
The consequences when we get it wrong are devastating. As always, our thoughts are with those who lost their lives, both aboard the aircraft and on the ground. But the Louisville crash isn't the only accident raising questions this week, because the next one was also caught on video, and it depicts a befuddling loss of control during a routine go-around. Now, I should start off by saying that routine go-around is a bit of a misnomer. It's routine in that professional pilots train and are evaluated on the maneuver every year, but it's rare in the real world, and it requires a relatively abrupt change to thrust and pitch attitude, both of which means that it comes with some risk. Video captured the final moments as the aircraft entered a steep, accelerating left-hand descent before crashing. Fortunately into an abandoned hangar and a football field, and with relatively empty tanks to feed the ensuing blaze. Some Mexican officials initially suggested the pilots may have been attempting a forced landing in the field to avoid populated areas, but the video seems to show something different. A simple loss of control during the go-around. About 15 seconds before impact, the aircraft was already in a 25-degree descending left bank. 5 seconds later, that bank angle had increased to around 40 degrees, and in the final moments, it steepened to 50 to 60 degrees before the aircraft struck the ground. There were 10 people on board. None survived. The skies were also relatively clear, confounding how the pilots could have become so disoriented that they simply lost control of the aircraft. At this point, a mechanical failure can't be ruled out, maybe asymmetric flaps during the go-around, which the ailerons didn't have the control authority to overcome. The data doesn't indicate an engine failure. Airspeed never really degrades during the event. Something clearly happened here. Whether it was pilot-induced or the result of some sort of flight control malfunction is the questions that investigators need to answer. The third accident may actually be the most puzzling of the 3, because on paper, this is the kind of aircraft and crew combination that should not terminate suddenly into the side of a mountain. 15 people killed aboard a Beech 1900, an airplane I know extremely well. It was the first aircraft I ever captained, and I logged nearly 3,000 hours flying it through the mountains of Colorado and Wyoming. which is why this crash immediately raised two questions for me, and the answers to those questions may lie in one very specific moment during the descent into that valley. First, how does a rugged turboprop with terrain warning systems end up flying into a mountainside? And second, why didn't the crew stop it? The Beech 1900 is a larger cousin of the legendary King Air series, originally built by Beechcraft before the company was eventually absorbed into Textron Aviation. It's not glamorous, it's rugged, a little bit ugly, but incredibly reliable, and almost everyone who has flown one loves it. The airplane is called the 1900 because it was designed for 19 passengers. In the United States, staying under 20 seats allows the aircraft to be certified in the commuter category, which is far cheaper and simpler to design and manufacture than the transport category required for larger airliners. Internationally, the rules are a little bit different. In Colombia, the aircraft was configured for 21 passengers plus 2 pilots. The preliminary report offers very little about the cause, but it does reveal something important about the airplane itself. The Beech 1900 isn't a highly automated aircraft. The ones I flew 15 years ago didn't have GPS or even autopilots. We navigated using VOR radio beacons and occasionally the more rustic non-directional beacons or NDBs. But this aircraft had been upgraded. It was equipped with GPS navigation, a flight management system, and a ground proximity warning system. In other words, it had technology specifically designed to warn pilots before they fly into terrain. Investigators were able to recover the flight data recorder, but the cockpit voice recorder was badly damaged, and Colombian investigators have struggled to retrieve usable audio. That recording would normally capture pilot conversations and warning alerts you would expect before striking a mountain. The pilots themselves were highly experienced. The 52-year-old captain had about 11,000 hours, and the 53-year-old first officer had roughly 8,300 hours. Weather information from the destination airport was incomplete. The reporting station was missing cloud and visibility data, but satellite observations suggest cloud bases were below 7,000 feet. The aircraft ultimately struck terrain at 6,881 feet. The airport sits in a narrow valley surrounded by mountains. It's a small field typical for the missions the 1900 flies, with no control tower and no radar services. At a certain point during the descent, the crew switched to the Common Traffic Advisory frequency, meaning they were now responsible for navigating themselves to the airport. To do that safely, pilots rely on charts showing the minimum safe altitudes designed to keep aircraft clear of terrain. I recently covered an Epic 1000 crash in Steamboat Springs, where the pilot descended below the published minimum altitude and struck a mountainside. The parallels here are undeniable. The Beech 1900 slammed into a mountainside, separating the airport valley from the surrounding terrain. Which brings us back to the two questions that we started with. Why didn't the terrain warning system stop this, and why didn't the pilots arrest the descent? Aviation accidents rarely come down to a single mistake. More often, they're the result of a chain of events, each linked by itself survivable, but in combination catastrophic. In this case, we can already see at least two of those links. Mountainous terrain, and incomplete weather reporting at the destination airport. The crew may have begun their descent expecting to break out of the clouds before terrain became a factor, hoping they would see the ground before the ground saw them. The precise scenario proximity warning systems are designed to protect against. They're built to alert pilots to rising terrain in time to climb safely away, and pilots are trained to respond immediately when those warnings sound. In the Steamboat Springs crash, those alerts may not have activated because the aircraft was already very close to the airport. The reason those alerts are inhibited in proximity to airports is that aircraft are supposed to be close to the ground, and nuisance alerts significantly degrade the life-saving characteristics of the devices. In this case, the Beech 1900 was around 10 miles from the runway when it struck the mountainside. And that raises a difficult question that the industry needs to examine closely. When do automated safety alerts become so common during normal operations that pilots begin to tune them out? And where is a line between nuisance warnings and life-saving ones? This is the sort of question that could have prevented the collision between the Black Hawk and regional jet over the Potomac in 2025, as traffic collision advisory systems are inhibited in a similar manner. It's a question without a simple answer. An imperfect response to the kinetics of aviation that, no matter which way you turn, are inevitably imperfect, relying on the sometimes flawed, rapid-fire reasoning of a pilot to separate a close call from a fatality. I suppose at some point, AI will do everything for us, leaving us bored on our sofa and perfectly safe. But for now, we've got some responsibility for it. For those of us who love the skies the risk is worth it. God bless the ones who lose this battle with uncertainty. Until next time, stay safe.